Hello and welcome to the Accessing Local Logs demo. In this video, we'll demonstrate how logs can help us to supervise, diagnose, and fix our ACME project. Our focus will be to view the logs generated by process execution in the output panel, to access local robot execution log files, to generate verbose level logs. Ready to begin? Okay, let's go through the pre-built project that we'll be using. The project navigates to ACME System 1, logs in, goes to the Download Client and Support page, downloads the work item PDF documents, and logs out. Pretty straightforward, right? It's important to highlight here that the main sequence that contains all of the activities is missing. This is because we now have the option to declutter the project canvas by hiding unnecessary containers. You can select the Hide Sequences design setting to no longer display the main sequence and other containers that are added by default to your project. Whether you enable or disable this setting is up to you, since it doesn't affect workflow execution. Alright, now before we run our process, please make sure that you have ACME credentials, username and password. The workflow will ask us for our credentials to successfully log in. Now let's run the process to generate the robot execution logs and follow its progress. The process starts with checking the folder path for where to save the PDF files. Next, it tries to get the credentials for ACME System 1 from Windows Credential Manager. In our case, no credentials are stored in the Credential Manager, and so it asks us to input them. Let's go ahead and do that. Then it opens the recommended Edge browser, navigates to ACME System 1 website, and logs in. After that, goes to User Options, and then Download Client and Support page, and start downloading the work item PDF files. Of course, these files are saved in the specified path. After downloading all 5 work item files, it logs out of ACME System 1. Great, now comes the fun part. We've modified the initial project to generate all of the different log levels that we might receive. Let's run it once again, quickly. Okay, the throw activity lets us know that the file couldn't be saved successfully. We'll understand why in a minute. For now, let's click OK and check the output panel to see the logs of the execution. So, the proper use of logging in an automation project has several benefits, such as better visibility of actions and events, easier debugging, and more meaningful auditing. The log levels are color-coded. Gray for trace and fatal, black for info, orange for warn, red for error. A log level is a piece of information that tells the importance of a given log message. We can think of log levels as a way to filter critical information about our process state. Here, we can select all of the buttons in the output panel that includes all log levels, or select the one that interests us. For example, the Information button includes info level logs. If we select the Warn button, it'll also include warning level logs, and so on for the rest of them. Trace, error, and timestamp that does exactly that. It timestamps each log entry. Now that we're familiar with the log levels and accessing the log messages in the output panel, let's see how we can interpret them. Based on the logs in the output, did the execution complete successfully? If you thought no, you're right. While error level logs can indicate both a handled and unhandled exception, the fatal level log makes it clear that this process did not complete successfully. Can you point out the workflow that caused the execution to stop by throwing the error message that we saw earlier? Indeed, it's the Download Client and Support workflow. Okay, so far so good. While we're here in main, let's take a look at the log properties for the invoke workflow activities. If we simply select only invocation for log entry and only successful return log exit with log level info, then it will automatically log the information. We'll no longer need to add a log message activity at the start and end of each workflow. This is particularly useful for debugging without adding lots of log message activities. If you want to practice on your own, you can open one of your previously created projects, run it, and check the logs generated in the output panel. A few takeaways when choosing a log level are that it's important to know how visible we want the message to be, the magnitude of the problem, and the way to address it. Awesome! It's time to move on and take a look at the execution logs stored locally. Click the Debug ribbon and then Open Logs option. Note that several types of logs are available in the Logs folder: Studio Project, Workflow Analyzer, and others. Let's open today's execution log using a code editor. This is the default log file path for execution logs. As we can see, each log entry has one numbered row in the code editor. Each entry consists of a collection of log fields of a key value pair in the format key:value. For example, log type :default, and they're separated by a comma. The log level can be found at the start of each log entry right after the timestamp, as well as in the level log field. If you scroll down in your execution file, what are some other generated log levels? Ready to move on? Let's close this file. And let's find out what happens in situations where we need to log more extensive information to identify an unexpected issue. Luckily, we have the verbose level. This level generates default logs for the execution of each individual activity, allowing for a much more in-depth diagnosis. However, generating verbose level logs can add a heavy load on the system and it can clutter log files. That's why the default state for this option is disabled. We recommend using it on a needs basis and then disabling it once the issue is identified. We can activate it locally from the Debug ribbon and select Log Activities option. The role of verbose level logs is to support in-depth debugging. These logs are generated locally only when running the project in debug mode. So, let's do that. Okay, let's check the output panel to see what the difference is. Notice how trace level logs are now present for activity and workflow start and end. Now let's see what the logs look like in the logs file. Once again, in the Debug ribbon, select Open Logs. We can notice here that aside from logging activity and workflow start and end, each verbose level default contains the names and values of the variables and arguments. Checking verbose level logs is a good example and a reminder of why it's important to give activities, variables, and arguments descriptive names. We've reached the end of this video where we've seen the logs generated by process execution in the output panel and how to interpret them, how to access local robot execution log files, and how to generate verbose level logs when needed. After watching this video, can you identify all logging levels and accurately use them in your workflows? How about accessing the local log files from UiPath Studio? Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy automation!